Jake had spent the last few years studying abroad far away from the lavish lifestyle of his father, Mr. Miller. As the heir to one of the wealthiest families in the country, Jake had always felt the weight of his family's fortune. His father, a successful businessman with a reputation built on years of hard work, had always pushed Jake to be the best, both in his studies and in life. But despite everything his father had provided, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that people only liked him because of his name and wealth. As he boarded the plane back home, he couldn't help but think of the challenge that lay ahead to find someone who loved him, not his riches. The idea had lingered in his mind for a while, and now that he was about to return to his father's company, he was determined to finally put it to the test. As the plane touched down and Jake stepped into the bustling airport, the air was filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. He had missed his family, but more than that, he was eager to start this new chapter of his life. Mr. Miller had already arranged for a grand homecoming, but Jake had other plans. He wasn't interested in being welcomed back with open arms surrounded by lavish parties and the glitzy world of wealth. Instead, he was determined to go undercover, to discover who truly cared for him, not because of his money, but for who he really was. Jake was certain that the women his father had chosen for him to meet would see him as nothing more than the son of a wealthy man. He couldn't trust them. The only way to find out if anyone was genuine was to present himself as someone else entirely. A plan began to form in Jake's mind, one that would test the limits of his patience and his relationships. The idea was simple but clever. He would disguise himself as a poor security guard at his father's company. By doing this, he could observe the two women his father had chosen, Emily and Kate, without them knowing who he really was. He would see how they treated him when they didn't know he was the son of Mr. Miller. Would they still be kind, respectful, and interested in him, or would their true motivations come to the surface? This plan would give him the clarity he needed to make the right decision when it came to love. Jake knew this wouldn't be easy. It wasn't just about disguising his identity. It was about testing his own ability to stay true to the plan. He would have to leave behind his usual comforts and live like one of the common workers, far away from the luxury of his father's estate. He would wear the faded blue security guard uniform, complete with a face cap and rubber sandals, a far cry from the tailored suits he was accustomed to. It would be a life of humility, one where he had to earn every bit of respect, not because of his family's wealth, but because of his own actions. It wasn't going to be comfortable, but Jake was determined to go through with it. If he could endure this, he would get the answers he was seeking. The next morning, Jake arrived at his father's company in his new disguise. As he walked through the gates, he could feel the weight of his decision settle in. He wasn't just playing a part. He was throwing himself into a world that he had always seen from the outside. The employees walked past him without a second glance, all too busy with their work to notice the quiet young man in the faded uniform. But Jake wasn't looking for attention. He wasn't interested in the stares or the whispers. What mattered now was how the two women his father had picked out for him would respond. Would they see him as just another worker, or would they treat him with the respect he deserved? And more importantly, would they be willing to look beyond his appearance to see who he truly was inside? As the day went on, Jake observed both Emily and Kate closely. Emily, who had always struck him as confident and a little too self-assured, passed by without even acknowledging him. She was busy, her eyes focused ahead, not even sparing a glance at the man in the security uniform. Jake couldn't help but smile to himself. He had expected as much. Emily, it seemed, was only interested in the perks that came with a rich, successful man. But then there was Kate. She was different. She smiled at him when she passed by, offering a polite greeting. It was nothing extravagant, just a simple, genuine smile, and that small act of kindness spoke volumes to Jake. As the day continued, it became clear that Kate was the one who treated him with the most respect, without knowing who he was. Jake's heart warmed at the thought, maybe she was the one he had been searching for all along. By the end of the day, Jake had seen enough. The plan had worked. He had learned that love, or the possibility of it, didn't come from money, fame, or status. It came from the way someone treated others when they thought no one was watching. Kate had passed the test with flying colors. She had treated him with kindness and respect, and in the process, she had shown Jake that she was different from the others. Now Jake had to figure out what to do next. Would he reveal his true identity to her? Would she still care about him once she knew the truth, or had he already learned everything he needed to know? One thing was certain. Jake had a new sense of clarity, and the journey ahead would be filled with important decisions. Mr. Miller, Jake's father, had always been a man of great influence, not just because of his wealth, but also due to the respect he commanded in the business world. As Jake returned home, Mr. Miller was eager to introduce him to two women he had carefully selected as potential wives. Both worked in his company, and he believed they were the kind of women who would complement Jake's future. Emily and Kate were different in many ways, yet both had qualities that Mr. Miller thought would suit Jake well. Emily was a strikingly beautiful woman with a sharp mind, ambitious, and determined to climb the corporate ladder. Kate, on the other hand, was quiet, calm, and grounded, known for her work ethic and her respectful nature. To Mr. Miller, both women had potential, but he had his reasons for believing that either could be a good match for his son. Emily, with her long, flowing hair and perfect posture, immediately carried herself like someone who belonged in the elite circles of society. She was always impeccably dressed, with every detail of her appearance carefully curated. Her confidence was evident in the way she spoke and carried herself, and she had a particular interest in Jake, which she made no attempt to hide. She knew that her beauty and ambition gave her an edge, and she was not shy about using those attributes to her advantage. When Mr. Miller mentioned Jake's return, Emily's eyes lit up, and she wasted no time in preparing herself to catch his attention. To her, the idea of marrying into the Miller family was not just a romantic notion. It was a way to secure her place among the upper echelons of society, and she was ready to do whatever it took. Emily had already decided that she was the one who should be with Jake, and she was determined to make that happen regardless of the competition. As Jake arrived at his father's company, he immediately noticed Emily's self-assured presence. She carried herself like she was already a part of the Miller family, walking through the halls with a sense of ownership. Her conversations with colleagues were filled with subtle hints about the future, about how she and Jake would soon be a power couple and how their union would benefit both of them. She acted as if they were already married, and her behavior often bordered on possessiveness, as if she were the one who was already chosen. Emily frequently mentioned her expectations for the future, speaking as though the position of wife to Jake was already secured without even considering the possibility of anyone else being in the running. Her confidence in this assumption made Jake uneasy, especially as he observed her interactions with others, many of whom seemed to treat her like she had already won the prize. It was clear that Emily believed her beauty and ambition would win her the spot beside Jake, and she wasn't about to let anyone get in her way. In stark contrast, there was Kate. While Emily exuded confidence and charm, Kate was more reserved, humble, and hard-working. She had a quiet elegance that didn't demand attention but earned respect through her actions. Kate had been with Mr. Miller's company for several years and was known for her calm demeanor and her ability to get things done efficiently. Her reputation for being kind and approachable made her a favorite among her colleagues, and her respectful nature stood out in an environment where many people were driven by competition and ambition. When Jake first saw Kate, he was immediately struck by the warmth in her smile and the genuine kindness in her eyes. Unlike Emily, Kate wasn't concerned with projecting an image of wealth or status. She focused on her work and treated everyone equally regardless of their position or title. To Jake, Kate's simplicity was refreshing, and her down-to-earth attitude was a stark contrast to the self-assured confidence that Emily carried so openly. Kate's interactions with Jake were kind and respectful, but not in the way that Emily's were. While Emily would constantly try to show off in front of Jake, dropping hints about her future with him, Kate treated him like any other person in the company. She never made any assumptions about Jake's background or wealth, and that was something Jake deeply appreciated. Even though he was disguised as a lowly security guard, Kate treated him with the same respect she showed to everyone else. Every morning she would greet him with a smile, never looking down on him or acting like she was superior. She once even offered him a cold bottle of water on a particularly hot day, acknowledging his hard work with a simple, "You're doing a good job." This small act of kindness made Jake's heart swell, and he couldn't help but wonder if Kate might be the one who truly cared about him for who he was not, for the status he would eventually inherit. While Emily flaunted her assumptions about being the chosen one, Kate's quiet, respectful behavior left a lasting impression on Jake. Over the following weeks, he began to notice the subtle differences in how the two women approached him. Emily would often make bold comments about their future together, assuming that her beauty and ambition would win Jake's heart, while Kate continued to treat him with sincerity, kindness, and respect. Emily was always the first to boast about her qualifications and her role in the company, but Kate rarely mentioned her accomplishments unless asked, and when she did, it was always with humility. As the days passed, Jake became more and more convinced that Kate was different from Emily. While Emily tried to impress him with her beauty and ambition, Kate captured his attention with her heart. It wasn't long before Jake realized that he had found someone who treated him as a person, not as a wealthy heir, and that made all the difference. As the days went by, Jake found himself growing closer to Kate, drawn to her sincerity and her genuine nature. Despite his disguise, she had never treated him with anything less than respect. Emily, on the other hand, continued to act as though she was the future Mrs. Miller, making plans and assumptions about a life that hadn't even begun. Jake's heart began to lean more toward Kate, and he couldn't help but admire her for who she was. While Emily's outward beauty and ambition were undeniable, Jake had come to see that true beauty lay in a person's heart. And as the days passed, he found himself wondering what it would be like to share his life with someone like Kate, someone who loved him for the man he truly was not, for the wealth and status he would one day inherit. Jake had always been a keen observer, but now more than ever he found himself paying close attention to the way people behaved around him, especially the two women his father had introduced. As days passed, his observations became more pointed, particularly when it came to Emily. From the moment she stepped into the office, Emily's behavior was hard to ignore. It wasn't just her beauty or her confidence that drew attention, it was her arrogance and entitlement that stood out. She moved through the office like someone who already owned the place, acting as though she was the future daughter-in-law of Mr. Miller. Her conversations with colleagues were filled with exaggerated stories about her relationship with Jake, even though they hadn't yet met. She spoke about her assumed future with Jake as though it was a done deal, and the more she boasted, the more Jake realized how shallow her intentions were. Emily's treatment of the staff was equally telling. She had a way of speaking to people that made it clear she saw herself as superior. Whenever she walked through the halls, she would brush past employees without even acknowledging their presence. She spoke down to the junior staff using condescending tones and treating them as if they were beneath her. Jake couldn't help but notice how she dismissed the people around her, including the security guards and receptionists, with an air of superiority. It was as though she believed her beauty and her connection to the Miller family were enough to give her the right to treat others with disdain. Emily's arrogance was not just in her words, it was in her actions. She would often parade around the office, making sure everyone knew about her special connection to Jake, even though she had never actually spoken to him. It became clear to Jake that Emily was more interested in securing a title than in finding real love. She wasn't here for him. She was here for what he could offer her, and that realization stung. Meanwhile, Kate was the complete opposite. Jake had noticed her on the first day, but now he paid closer attention to the way she interacted with him and others. Kate's kindness was subtle but powerful. Every day she greeted him with a warm smile, acknowledging him as if he were just another person in the office, not the son of one of the wealthiest men in the country. Unlike Emily, who was quick to boast about her assumed future, Kate never spoke of such things. She treated everyone the same, regardless of their position. Kate's kindness wasn't just reserved for the high-ranking executives or her colleagues. She extended it to the security guards, the cleaners, and even Jake, who was still pretending to be a mere worker in the company. One afternoon, on a particularly hot day, Kate approached Jake with a bottle of water and handed it to him with a smile. "You look like you could use this," she said. her voice soft and genuine. Jake was taken aback by the small but meaningful gesture. It wasn't about impressing him, it was simply an act of kindness, and it was something he hadn't experienced from anyone else in the company, especially not from Emily. Jake's heart began to soften toward Kate. She treated him with respect, not because she knew who he was or because she had any ulterior motives, but because she was genuinely kind. In her eyes, Jake was just another person, no different from anyone else. She didn't treat him like a means to an end, like Emily did. It was this respect, this dignity in how she carried herself that made Jake begin to realize just how special Kate was. He saw that she had no agenda other than to be herself, and that was a rare quality in the world Jake lived in. He appreciated her for what she was, someone who didn't need to flaunt her beauty or position to gain respect. Kate didn't make anyone feel small, and her actions spoke volumes about her character. In contrast, Emily's true nature became even more apparent as Jake continued to observe her. One afternoon, Jake overheard her speaking to a group of friends in the office cafeteria. "I don't know why some people even bother pretending to be important," Emily was saying, "especially those who will never make it to the top. I, on the other hand, am just waiting for the day. Jake and I make it official." She laughed with her friends, who clapped and giggled in response, unaware of the disdain in her voice. Jake felt a twinge of disgust as he listened. Emily's words made it clear that she saw herself as above the rest, and her ambition wasn't about love or connection, it was about power, status, and money. She wasn't interested in Jake for who he was. She was only interested in what he could give her. As Jake stood by the door pretending to be busy with his work, he couldn't help but shake his head. He had heard enough. Emily's true nature was out in the open, and it was nothing like the genuine heart he had seen in Kate. The more Jake observed, the more the contrast between Emily and Kate became glaring. Emily's every word and action reinforced her desire to marry into wealth, while Kate's kindness and humble nature made her stand out as a person of integrity. Jake realized that Kate wasn't playing a game. She wasn't pretending to be someone she wasn't in order to win his affection. She had treated him with the same respect she showed everyone else, regardless of the wealth or status he might have. It was a rare and precious quality, one that Jake appreciated more than anything else. On the other hand, Emily had already shown her true colors. Her arrogance and disrespect had made it clear that she was only interested in Jake for his wealth. She would have never treated him with the same kindness that Kate did, and it was becoming increasingly clear that Emily's intentions were anything but pure. As Jake continued to observe, he couldn't help but feel grateful for his decision to go undercover. If he hadn't disguised himself as a security guard, he would have never seen the truth about Emily and Kate. Emily had shown him exactly who she was, and it wasn't someone he could trust. Kate, on the other hand, had earned his admiration and respect, not because she had any hidden agenda, but because she had shown him kindness when she didn't have to. Jake knew then that his search for real love wasn't over, but he had learned a valuable lesson. True love wasn't about wealth or status. It was about finding someone who cared for you, not because of what you had, but because of who you were. And with that realization, Jake felt his heart open to the possibility of something genuine with Kate. Jake had been living in disguise for weeks now, working tirelessly as a security guard at his father's company. Every day he watched both Emily and Kate, noting their reactions and behavior toward him. He had seen enough to confirm his suspicions. Emily's interest in him was based purely on his family's wealth, while Kate had treated him with nothing but respect and kindness, never once showing an ounce of pretense or judgment. It was clear to Jake that the game he had been playing, the test to find out who would love him for who he truly was nearing its end. But what he didn't know was that his father, Mr. Miller, had been aware of his plan all along. Miller, although a wealthy and influential businessman, was no stranger to the importance of sincerity in relationships. He had raised Jake to be wise, cautious, and most importantly, to never rush into anything for the wrong reasons. As a father, he understood the pressure that came with being the heir to such a large fortune, and he knew that finding true love wasn't about attracting someone who was interested in money or status. He had always supported Jake's decisions, and when Jake decided to disguise himself as a humble security guard, Mr. Miller was not only supportive, but also silently encouraged his son's plan. He trusted that Jake would discover who truly cared about him, not for the wealth he would inherit, but for the person he was. Mr. Miller was confident that in time his son would find someone who valued his heart over his bank account, and that person he believed was already right under Jake's nose. The time had come for Jake to reveal his true identity. He had spent enough time observing Emily and Kate, and he knew the moment had arrived to see their true reactions. Jake, still wearing his security guard uniform, made his way to the office where Emily was having a conversation with some colleagues. He approached her quietly, and when she saw him, her smile immediately faded, her eyes narrowing in confusion. "Jake, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This was it. The truth would be revealed, and he needed to stand his ground. "Actually, I'm not just a security guard," Jake said, his voice calm but firm. He took off his cap, revealing his face completely. "I'm Jake Miller, the son of Mr. Miller, the one you've been so eager to meet." The shock on Emily's face was instantaneous. Her mouth opened and closed, as if struggling to find the right words. The confidence that had once radiated from her seemed to crumble in an instant. She stammered, You're Jake Miller." Her expression went from surprise to embarrassment, and it was clear that she had no idea how to react. She had spent all this time pretending to care about him, only to realize that she had been wrong all along. The air in the room seemed to thicken with tension as Emily struggled to maintain her composure. She had been so sure that her beauty and ambition would win Jake's heart, but now she saw the reality of the situation. Jake had never been the person she thought he was, and her facade of confidence had shattered. While Emily was reeling from the revelation, Jake's attention shifted to Kate, who was walking down the hallway at that moment. As she passed by, she stopped when she saw the scene unfolding between Jake and Emily. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting to see what would happen next. Jake could see the subtle curiosity in her eyes, but unlike Emily, she didn't seem shocked or embarrassed. Instead, Kate's calm demeanor remained unchanged as she approached him with a gentle smile. "Jake," Kate said softly, her voice full of warmth, "I knew there was something different about you from the beginning. You didn't need to prove anything to me." Jake felt his heart swell at her words. Unlike Emily, Kate hadn't treated him any differently because of his wealth or status. She had always treated him with kindness and respect, never once questioning his background. It was as though she had seen him for the person he was all along, not the person others assumed he was. Jake took a step toward Kate, and in that moment he realized just how much he had come to admire her. "Kate." Jake began, his voice full of emotion. "You've been the only one to treat me like a person, not as someone to be used for their money. I never wanted anyone to love me for what I could offer them. I wanted to know who would love me for who I truly am." Kate's eyes softened as she listened to Jake's confession. She stepped closer, her hand gently brushing his arm. "Jake," she whispered, "I've always loved you for who you are, not what you have. I never needed anything more than that." Jake smiled, a weight lifting off his shoulders. Finally, the truth was out. He no longer had to hide behind a disguise, and he didn't have to worry about being loved for the wrong reasons. Kate had proven that she cared for him not because of his wealth, but because of his heart. As they stood there in the midst of the chaos and the confusion caused by Emily's reaction, Jake realized that he had found what he had been searching for all along. It wasn't fame, fortune, or status that mattered. It was the genuine connection he had with Kate. And with that, Jake felt a new sense of freedom. Freedom to love and to be loved for who he truly was. "I've been looking for true love," Jake said, his voice steady, "and I've found it, not in wealth, not in status, but in you, Kate." Kate smiled warmly, her hand still gently resting on his arm. "And I've been looking for someone who values honesty and kindness," she replied softly. "I've found that in you, Jake." In that moment, Jake and Kate shared a quiet understanding, a bond forged in sincerity. It was a new beginning for them both, one that was free of pretense and full of possibilities. And while Emily might have been shocked by Jake's revelation, Kate embraced him for who he truly was, and together they began their journey, one built on trust, respect, and genuine love. As time went on, Jake found himself drawn closer to Kate. After the revelation of his true identity, he had been anxious about how things would unfold, especially with Emily still lingering in the background. But Kate, unlike anyone else, had shown him what real love looked like. She didn't need to know about his wealth or his father's influence to care for him. From the moment she had accepted him as a person, not as a prize or a status symbol, Jake knew that he had found someone genuine, someone who valued him for who he truly was. Over the next few days, they spent more time together, talking, laughing, and slowly building a bond that felt stronger than anything Jake had ever experienced before. The connection between them deepened, and Jake, feeling more certain of his feelings than ever, knew that he had to be honest with Kate about everything. One afternoon, as they sat together in the park near the company, Jake took Kate's hand in his. He looked at her with earnest eyes, as if searching for something in her expression. "Kate, I want you to know that I've been falling for you every day since I met you. I never wanted my wealth to define me, and it's because of you that I've learned what it truly means to be loved for who I am. I don't want to hide anymore. I want to be with you no matter what the future holds." Kate smiled, her eyes soft with affection. "Jake," she said gently, "I've known from the beginning that it wasn't your money that mattered. I've always loved you for your kindness, your heart, your sincerity, and I'm willing to take that risk with you, whatever may come." Jake's heart swelled with gratitude. In a world where so many people were drawn to wealth and status, Kate had shown him that love wasn't about what you had, but who you were. From that moment, they officially became a couple. They kept their relationship private for a while, knowing that not everyone would understand, but they didn't care. For the first time in his life, Jake felt truly seen. Kate didn't care about his money or his family's name. She cared about him, and that was enough for both of them. However, Emily, despite the clear signs that Jake had chosen, Kate refused to let go. Her obsession with wealth and status had clouded her judgment, and she couldn't accept that Jake had rejected her for someone who didn't care about money. She began scheming behind the scenes, trying to sabotage Jake and Kate's growing relationship. Emily would show up at the office, trying to insert herself into conversations, making sly remarks about Kate and spreading rumors, but every attempt Emily made to tear them apart failed. Jake and Kate's bond only grew stronger with each passing day. Every time Emily tried to interfere, Kate remained calm and dignified, showing no sign of weakness. She continued to treat everyone with respect, including Emily, who, despite her best efforts, could not break them apart. It wasn't long before the truth about Emily's intentions came to light. One day, after overhearing a conversation between Emily and one of her friends, Jake realized just how fake her love had been all along. Emily had never cared for him. She had only been interested in the power and wealth that came with being associated with the Miller name. In her own words, she had even said, "If I can't have Jake, I'll make sure no one else does. It's my destiny to be with him, and no one else is worthy." Jake, feeling a deep sense of disappointment and betrayal, decided that it was time to confront Emily. Once and for all, he approached her one afternoon, his voice steady and firm. "Emily, I've watched you for a long time now. Your actions, your words have shown me who you really are. You never loved me. You loved the idea of me, the wealth, the power, but I won't let you continue to manipulate people for your own gain. Your fake love ends here." Emily's face turned red with embarrassment, but there was nothing she could say in her defense. She had been exposed for the shallow, selfish person she was. The truth was out, and her chances with Jake were gone forever. She tried to argue, but Jake was resolute. "I won't let you ruin my life or anyone else's. You've already hurt too many people with your lies. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." Emily's world crumbled around her as she realized that the opportunity she had taken for granted was slipping away, leaving her with nothing but regret. With Emily out of the picture, Jake turned to Kate, who had been his rock through it all. He knew what he had to do next. One evening, as the sun began to set, Jake took Kate to the very park where they had shared so many meaningful conversations. This time, however, there was a sense of finality in the air, an unspoken understanding that everything was about to change. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. With a smile that was full of love and hope, he dropped to one knee. "Kate," he began, his voice steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "You've made me the happiest man alive. You've shown me that love isn't about money or status, but about respect, kindness, and trust. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Kate's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, overwhelmed by the sincerity of his words. "Yes, Jake. Yes, I will marry you." The two embraced, their hearts beating in sync, knowing that they had found something real and pure amidst a world of pretense. Jake and Kate's journey was just beginning, but they knew that with each other they could face anything. As they celebrated their engagement with family and friends, Emily was left behind a cautionary tale of what happens when one's intentions are guided by greed. Jake and Kate's love triumphed over everything, and they were ready to begin their new life together, leaving behind the people and the lies that had once threatened to tear them apart. In the end, true love prevailed. It wasn't the wealth, the status, or the power that mattered. It was the sincerity, the honesty, and the genuine affection that Jake and Kate shared. They had proven that love could withstand even the most challenging tests, and with that, they were ready to face the future together. Meanwhile, Emily was left to deal with the consequences of her actions, her heart filled with regret for the opportunity she had squandered. Thank you for joining us at Deep Inside HQ, where we bring you stories filled with drama, love, and real-life lessons. If you enjoyed this tale of true love prevailing over wealth and status, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what lessons you've learned from Jake and Kate's journey. Stay tuned for our next captivating story and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Keep following Deep Inside HQ for more heartwarming and thought-provoking content.